Hi guys, I hope you're doing well today. I'm Jude Michael S. Arroyo, the representative of Group 6 from ETLJ, and I'm here to discuss about our literary criticism from the poem Problem Is by Conchitina Cruz. So without further ado, let's get started. Before we begin to discuss the literary criticism itself, let's talk about first the author, Conchitina Cruz. She is a popular Filipino poet and a teacher of creative writing and comparative literature in the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her nickname is Chingbi, and her family and friends calls her that. She was a former medical student before she shifted to creative writing in the University of the Philippines. Most of her poems talks about societal problems with a modern and relatable tone. She won 2 Carlos Palanca Awards in 1996 and 2001 for The Second Skin and for The Shortest Distance, respectively. Now that you know about the author, let's dive in with the poem. Just a brief summary of the poem. The poem Problem Is by Conchitina Cruz is a straight and direct to the point poem. It belongs to the genre of lyrical poetry, which consists of 10 stanzas and expressed in the first person point of view. It speaks about the overpopulation of Filipinos and how they multiply like rabbits. The poem is telling us how poor Filipinos don't have enough money for movies, expensive dates, and books, but instead they do sex because it's free and easily accessible. Poor Filipinos don't have enough knowledge about these things. That's why it leads to procreation. Before the poem ends, it speaks that poor Filipino are wishing to cross into the other side, that one day they can have the right direction and live their lives better. In the poem, the title itself is the meaning of the poem, that nowadays, Filipinos are the real problem. Now that you have a brief background and summary about the author and the poem, we should now proceed to the most anticipated part of the video, which we tackles the literary criticisms of the poem using different literary theories. Literary criticisms are used to find out how outstanding literary pieces are regardless of their types, genres, and forms. In this literary criticism, we use 5 different literary theories: the moral philosophical under the author-dependent approach, the formalism and structuralism under the text-dependent approach, the reader-dependent approach, and the Marxist approach. Let's differentiate the literary theories first for us to understand them better. Author-dependent approach is questioned on how the author wrote this and what influences her to wrote this kind of works. Under this is moral philosophical, which is about finding the most striking expression in our moral thinking. Text-dependent approach is about how we elaborate the work by observing and analyzing it. Under this is formalism and structuralism. Formalism is about the structure and form of the text, while the structuralism is concerned with the symbols and figure of speech found on the text. Reader-dependent approach is about how the reader would respond to the text. And lastly, Marxism. It focuses on how literature is used to show the current situation of society. And now that you're ready, let's proceed to the application of these literary theories. In moral philosophical, this approach is highly suited for the poem. Based on the poem's context, sex is very rampant and easily accessible due to the lack of money and space. The 21st century generation is more into sex than the previous generations. If we look back at the earlier history, sex is considered sacred, and only married people are allowed to have sex. Otherwise, people who had sex before marriages, especially women, are considered immoral and unethical. This concept evolved and barely happened. They believe now that their body, their rules. This is their way to justify that once a sacred exchange of energy is now for free. In formalism, first stanza depicts that Filipinos rapidly multiply because they have nothing else to do but to have sex. Second to fourth stanza depicts that poor Filipinos live in small houses and tiny space, which triggers them to have sex. In fifth to sixth stanza, it depicts that Filipinos have no money for movies, dinners, and books, so they prefer sex because it's free and easily accessible. 7 to the last stanza depicts the satisfaction towards each other, and together they can conquer every problem that will come. It also shows that Filipinos can escape their situation and societal problems shown in the earlier stanza and have a better life. In structuralism, the signifiers that used in the poem are rabbits, which signifies the Filipinos that look over from a dull field into a greener one. This is the reason why many Filipinos migrate to other countries because they believe that they will have a better future there. Money and space, it signifies the reason why poor Filipinos multiply rapidly. And lastly, the tongue, which signifies the word of regret and hardship of poor Filipinos. Now, for the reader-dependent approach, as a reader, we are inclined to believe that the poem is rampant and relevant to the 21st century, and it should have solutions as early as possible. Poverty and overpopulation are some of the major problems in any country, especially here in the Philippines. Many people lack knowledge about family planning and the usage of contraceptives. It is getting worse now due to the increasing rate of teenage pregnancies. It is saddening how people normalize this kind of situations. These uncomfortable situations lead to hideous crimes and involvement in usage of drugs just to support their everyday lives. And lastly, using the Marxist approach, it tells us that the poem itself is a sociological reflection on societal evils in the Philippines, particularly the poverty and overpopulation. We can see in the poem that there is something wrong with our country's economy. That's why we're encountering this kind of problem that was shown in the poem. So that's it, guys, for this video. I hope you learned a lot from me. Stay safe and see you in my next one. Bye!